Imagine waking up one day to realize that every decision you've ever made, what you studied, how you dress, the way you speak, even the dreams you've dared to have, was not entirely your own. You trace the path of your life and see faint fingerprints everywhere, not of individuals, but of a system, a quiet, invisible hand that gently nudged you toward acceptable choices, smiled when you conformed, and fell silent when you questioned. At first, it seems harmless. You follow the rules, get rewarded with praise, opportunities, belonging. You learn early that compliance earns approval, and approval feels like safety. But underneath that safety lies a deeper, quiet whisper. What if your obedience is the price of your truth? You've seen it before. The student who dared to challenge a teacher and was labeled difficult. The worker who questioned the company's values and found themselves isolated. The child who spoke an uncomfortable truth and was told to be quiet. Society has an elegant way of rewarding those who fit and punishing those who disrupt. But why? Is it because truth is dangerous? Or because obedience is easier to control? Is the world built on shared truths or shared illusions? We celebrate freedom, yet most are trapped in a psychological contract they never signed. A contract where comfort is exchanged for silence, and belonging is earned by not asking too many questions. We tell ourselves that rebels change the world, but deep down, we're taught to fear becoming one of them. So here's the great question. Why does a society built on ideals of progress, justice, and truth reward obedience over truth itself? And perhaps more unsettling, what happens to the soul of a person who stops asking why? The answer isn't simple. It's woven through our collective psyche, stitched into our education, our politics, our families. But if you look closely, if you have the courage to peer beneath the surface, the pattern begins to reveal itself. To understand why society rewards obedience over truth, you have to look beneath the polished surface of order and progress. Truth, by its very nature, is unruly. It doesn't care for comfort, convenience, or collective harmony. It shakes the walls of institutions and exposes the fragile myths that hold them together. And myths, whether national, cultural, or personal, are the glue that keeps societies from falling into chaos. From an early age, the human mind is trained to associate truth-telling with danger and obedience with safety. A child who says what adults don't want to hear is scolded. A student who questions too much is labeled a problem. A citizen who speaks against the state is branded. This conditioning is subtle, but its roots run deep. Carl Jung once wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The same is true for societies. For a collective to confront its own truth means to face its shadow, the suppressed injustices, hypocrisies, and contradictions that it hides beneath layers of tradition, law, and culture. So instead of truth, societies cultivate narratives, stories that make sense, even if they're not entirely real. And to keep those stories alive, obedience becomes sacred. Friedrich Nietzsche observed that humans often prefer a comforting lie over a painful truth. Obedience offers structure, a world where roles are clear, questions are limited, and chaos is contained. It's easier to be a good citizen than a dangerous thinker. After all, obedience requires no inner revolution, no sleepless nights, no burden of carrying inconvenient truths. It's the softer path, but also the one that dulls the spirit over time. And then there's the psychological mechanism at work. When you obey, you are rewarded, not always with money or power, but with something far more addictive: acceptance. The human brain, wired for belonging, equates social acceptance with survival. This is why being cast out, even metaphorically, feels unbearable to most. So people swallow their truths, silence their questions, and play their part, not because they believe, but because they fear. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that human beings are condemned to be free. We have the power to choose, but that very freedom terrifies us. So we build systems, governments, religions, schools, ideologies to shield ourselves from the weight of freedom. Obedience becomes a refuge, not a prison. A comfortable illusion we cling to in order to escape the terror of facing the raw, chaotic truth of existence. But here's the paradox. A society built entirely on obedience doesn't just suppress truth, it slowly forgets it. People begin to believe the myths they once performed. They no longer see the bars of their psychological cages, because the cage becomes home. And the longer they stay, the more dangerous the truth appears. This is why the whistleblower is hated more than the liar. Why the heretic is feared more than the tyrant. Truth tellers are not just inconvenient. They are destabilizing forces. They hold up a mirror that no one wants to look into. And yet, beneath this collective fear lies something far more dangerous: quiet, creeping consequence that shapes the world in ways most don't even notice. Obedience is not neutral. It has a cost, a silent, insidious cost that grows with every generation. When a society rewards compliance over courage, silence over honesty, something profound begins to wither. The human capacity for authentic thought. Imagine millions of minds moving through life like synchronized gears in a machine, all functioning smoothly, none daring to move against the rhythm. At first, it looks efficient, even admirable. No chaos, no dissonance. But look closer, and you'll see a kind of stillness that feels more like a graveyard than harmony. A world where people follow orders without questioning why they exist in the first place. This obedience doesn't just shape behavior, it shapes identity. You stop asking, "Who am I?" and start asking, "Who should I be?" You trade your inner compass for a map drawn by others. And in doing so, you begin to lose the fragile thread that connects you to something real: your own truth. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer warned that humans often mistake the opinion of the masses for truth. When enough people repeat a lie, it hardens into reality. And soon, individuals don't just obey, they believe. They carry myths like heirlooms, polishing them with pride, passing them down as sacred. In schools, children learn not how to think, but what to think. In workplaces, employees are rewarded not for questioning the system, but for fitting neatly into it. Governments thrive not because citizens are empowered, but because they are docile. Religions survive not through revelation, but through ritual. This is how obedience silently replaces curiosity, one generation at a time. But perhaps the most dangerous consequence of all is the birth of moral sleep. When people obey without reflection, they outsource responsibility. Atrocities throughout history have rarely been committed by monsters alone. They were carried out by ordinary people obeying extraordinary orders. It is obedience, not hatred, that makes cruelty scalable. It's the quiet shrug of the compliant that builds the foundation for every tyrant's throne. This erosion of individual thought doesn't just happen at the political or societal level. It happens inside you. Every time you silence your discomfort, every time you look away from something that feels wrong but isn't your place to question, the truth becomes a little less real to you. It fades like a distant echo, and in its place grows a numbnessy kind of spiritual anesthesia that keeps the world quiet. Even as it decays, Aldous Huxley once described this state as a comfortable prison without walls. People learn to love their chains because they've been taught to see them as safety nets. And so, a society built on obedience doesn't need external oppression. It becomes self-policing. People watch themselves. People censor themselves. This is the unseen consequence. A world where truth doesn't need to be suppressed, it simply disappears, buried under the weight of silent nods and forced smiles. And yet, even in the darkest cages, there are those who hear the faint sound of something cracking, a whisper in the back of their minds that says, "This isn't real." These are the rebels, not in the loud, violent sense, but in the quiet, dangerous way that threatens the very structure of obedience. The real rebellion begins long before anyone takes to the streets. Rebellion doesn't always begin with fire in the streets. More often, it begins in silence, when a single person dares to ask why. It starts in the smallest, most intimate of spaces, the mind, a thought that refuses to be caged, a discomfort that can't be explained away, and then a dangerous act, refusing to obey what no longer feels true. This rebellion is not about breaking rules. It's about reclaiming authorship over your own existence. Throughout history, the greatest revolutions were not led by those who merely shouted the loudest, but by those who saw clearly. Friedrich Nietzsche urged individuals to become who you are, a challenge that cuts deeper than slogans or manifestos. To become who you are is an act of defiance in a world designed to tell you who to be. It means dismantling the borrowed language, inherited fears, and scripted dreams that obedience plants inside you. The first step toward liberation is recognizing the architecture of your obedience. Ask yourself, who benefits from my silence? Who profits from my compliance? Whose voice is living inside my head, wearing the mask of my own thoughts? This kind of questioning is dangerous precisely because it shifts power from the collective myth to the individual will. Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that freedom is terrifying. To choose for yourself is to stand naked before an indifferent universe. No ready-made meaning, no script, but in this terrifying nakedness, something beautiful happens. Responsibility returns home. Freedom, real freedom, doesn't come with applause. It comes with doubt, fear, and often isolation. You'll begin to notice how much of your identity was built not on conviction, but on imitation. You may lose the comfort of belonging to the obedient crowd, but you gain something far more valuable, your own voice. This rebellion also requires learning to tolerate uncertainty. Obedience offers clarity. The rules are already written. Truth, on the other hand, is messy. It doesn't come in neat packages or slogans. It requires patience, courage, and sometimes pain. But if obedience is the numbness of the soul, truth is its awakening. Consider the words of Carl Jung. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. To do this, you must confront your shadow, those hidden parts of yourself that obedience taught you to deny. Anger, doubt, desire, fear, rebellion begins when you stop outsourcing your morality and start confronting these forces directly, unfiltered by the expectations of others. There will be resistance, not only from outside, but within. The mind, accustomed to comfort, will whisper, "This is dangerous." But danger isn't always a warning. Sometimes it's an invitation. And so, breaking free isn't about overthrowing systems overnight. It's about subtle acts of courage, saying what you truly think in a room that expects silence, choosing integrity over acceptance, living in alignment with truth, even when it costs you comfort. These small fractures spread. One honest act inspires another. Rebellion becomes contagious. A society begins to change, not when the obedient masses are pushed, but when individuals stand still in a world that demands they bow. And when enough people stand still, something extraordinary happens. The structure of obedience trembles, not from force, but from awakening. This is the power of quiet rebellion. Not chaos, not destruction, awakening. And yet, even in the darkest cages, there are those who hear the faint sound of something cracking, a whisper in the back of their minds that says, "This isn't real." These are the rebels, not in the loud, violent sense, but in the quiet, dangerous way that threatens the very structure of obedience. The real rebellion begins long before anyone takes to the streets. Imagine standing in the middle of a vast, empty square. The wind moves through the silence, and for the first time, there is no voice telling you what to do, what to believe, or who to become. There is only you. At first, the silence is deafening. For so long, you've lived surrounded by a chorus of commands, subtle, relentless, invisible. The voice of society, the weight of culture, the script handed to you at birth. Now, in this silence, something unsettling becomes clear. You were never just following rules. You were building your identity out of obedience. This is the ultimate paradox. Obedience gives structure but steals essence. It creates a comfortable prison, one where the bars are invisible and the door is left unlocked. You could have walked out at any time, but comfort whispered, "Stay." The final truth is both liberating and brutal. No one is coming to set you free. Not a leader, not a system, not even an ideology. Freedom, as Jean-Paul Sartre declared, is a burden that can't be shared. It is an existential weight that sits on your shoulders alone. And yet, in that weight lies your greatest power. The moment you stop obeying the invisible scripts is the moment you reclaim authorship of your reality. You stop performing and start becoming. You begin to see how society isn't a monolith controlling you. It's a collective illusion sustained by your own compliance. Friedrich Nietzsche called for the creation of the Bermensch, not a superhuman in strength, but one who dares to write their own values in a world where values have become inherited relics. To embody this truth means accepting that life's meaning isn't handed down, it's carved out through your choices, your courage, your rebellion. The great illusion of obedience is that it promises belonging, but belonging earned through conformity is fragile. It depends on silence. Truth, in contrast, offers no such comfort. but it offers something far more enduring: authenticity. And authenticity, though heavy, is unshakable. It's the only foundation on which a free soul can stand. The final realization isn't a grand, heroic moment. It's quiet, almost imperceptible. It's the moment you look at the chains on your wrists and realize they were made of paper. It's the soft but seismic shift from "what should I do" to "what do I choose?" True freedom does not roar, it whispers. It waits for you to listen. And so the square isn't empty after all. It's full of possibilities. Every choice you make from this moment forward is a brushstroke on the canvas of your own existence. You are no longer the character in a script written by someone else. You are the author. This is the truth most people run from. It's why obedience thrives. Freedom is terrifying. It strips away excuses. It leaves you face to face with yourself and no one else. But for those who dare to look, who dare to hold that weight and not look away, life becomes something extraordinary. Not easy, not safe, but real. And that, perhaps, is the quiet revolution the world needs most. Not more obedience, not louder noise, but individuals willing to stand in silence, hear their own voice, and build a life around it. Because truth, once heard, cannot be unheard, and freedom, once felt, cannot be forgotten.